Hi, and welcome to Dockside with Deb. In this weekly show, we'll talk to people who are doing some pretty cool things in sailing and experts in their field. I'm Deborah Diel, sailor, founder of MySail, and your host for today. Dockside with Deb is recorded live, so you can join in and ask your own questions. To find out more, head to mysail.team/Dockside with Deb. Let's get started. Big thanks to Katy MacDonald, who's joining us today as well. Katy is a commercial sailing instructor and skipper, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does, her background in sailing, and some of the racing that she's starting to get into now as well. So Katy, can you start by telling us how you actually started sailing initially?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Deb. So I started way back when I was about 6 or 7 down at Cronulla Sailing Club as my local little sailing club. And I was lucky enough, I had a couple of friends from school that had actually sort of started sailing down there as well. So my mum sort of thought, yep, okay, cool. She's got a couple of friends there. Let's stick her in a boat and off she goes. And I would sort of, it was actually through one of my school friends' dads who'd sort of gone through and tried to teach all his 3 kids how to sail, and then ended up sort of, they didn't really pick it up. So I jumped on board with him in a little NS14, and he took me out for the first time, and we did half a season, and I loved it, picked it up, did the learn to sail through there as well. Started in Manly Juniors, went from like crewing in Manly Juniors, then skippered my own Manly Junior because I tried to go to Flying 11s as crew, but my first instance of being tried out as crew on a Flying 11 ended up with the spinnaker pole flying back and getting me straight in the top lip. So I ended up with a fat lip and said, no, I don't want to crew on Flying 11s. So convinced, was convinced by a couple of others to go, if you don't want to crew on it, maybe you could go back into a Manly Junior, but try it skipper. And so from Manly Juniors, Flying 11s, and then I did 29ers as well as skipper for a lot of the time, all the way through Cronulla. And then last sort of couple of seasons that I was there was either skippering or crewing 29ers, just to sort of keep my hand in the dinghy side of things. So yeah, that's originally how it sort of started, and I stuck to it.
Yeah, wow. And so it seems like you did a lot in dinghies and kind of had a bit of a propensity to want to be on the skipper side of things as well. How did you kind of move up? Because you've obviously done a lot more in larger boats and yachts now. How did you kind of initially move from the dinghy side of things into sailing yachts?
So from sort of I was still sailing dinghies all the way up to like after school, but to transition between the two, the Cronulla actually ended up getting a few scholarships for when the CYC started doing their development programs in the Elliots, so the Youth Sailing Academy. And a couple of us got to go and do the school holiday program at the Youth Sailing Academy. From there, they were like, yep, come back and give a couple of the others a go. So I started doing the YSA's development squad, and then the women's squad as well, and the advanced squads in their Elliott 6s at the time, and then they got the new Elliott 7s. So that was sort of the transition more into the sort of the keel boats, and then into yachts themselves. I was with the YSA, and Pam Scrivener, the wonderful admin of the YSA, I finished school and I was like, okay, I'd really like to keep sailing. Is there anything around here or something in the industry that you could recommend that I go into? And she's like, oh yeah, try next door. There's a company like next door to us. And so she gave me the contact of eSail, and at the time Peter Frankie. And then within a week I'd sort of rocked up to eSail and kind of gone, you know, very young sort of 18, 19-year-old going, hi. And Pete walked me up and down the docks and said, you know, you'll be doing this, 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 and this. You know, when can you start? I'm just like, oh, okay. And so literally I'd sort of just finished like high school and walked straight into East South to start, you know, summer job, which then turned into, you know, I'd spent a good 5 years with those guys. So it was like, that was my sort of more of an like baptism by fire into the yachts, just because everything I'd sailed before had a tiller. So the first time jumping on sort of some of those yachts, I was just like, okay, this is very strange. The wheel doesn't go the opposite way to to how you're meant to turn the boat. So but yeah, just started as like cleaning and decky jobs, and then sort of from there, you know, worked into you know, skippering and instructor roles too.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, because I was going to say, because it didn't sound like you had any of your kind of commercial tickets or anything when you first started with eSail. So what kind of training did you need to do to kind of move up the ranks into a skipper, commercial kind of skipper and instructor role?
Yeah, so eSail was, or still is, essentially, it's an RYA training school. So they teach the RYA syllabus, which is based out of the UK, but they can be used as equivalent certificates here in Australia. So the RYA syllabus, essentially, you can start it at any level, any experience. And so where you can sort of go, you've got your like start yachting competent crew. I started at a day skipper level. And so I did the theory components, followed by the practical, to then sort of get my day skipper. From there, you sort of, you fit into sort of step by step. So I then did the coastal skipper, theory and practical, and then that leads on to the yacht master theory, and then your exam for your yacht master. So that was a sort of the stepping stone, and I could sort of do it whilst I was at eSail, in terms of I was, you know, working on the boats, you know, and then also I had all my theory classes were at night, so I could go and, you know, sort of do that along the way. And then I was still getting all the experience on the yachts as well as deckhand, until, you know, I trained pretty hard for the yacht master in terms of all the, you know, exam potential situations that you can get sort of quizzed on. And then, yeah, so passed my yacht master. And then once I had my yacht master, that's then considered an equivalent ticket to a AMSA coxswain.
Yeah, okay, nice. And how long did that take to kind of go through and do all of that training from beginning to getting the tickets?
So first year at eSail, I was doing my day skipper, and I'd sort of by sort of first year, maybe 2 years, 2, 3 years in, I'd gone through day skipper, coastal skipper, and was doing my first sort of yacht master. Because there were a couple of different levels of yacht master. So I could, because I didn't have a whole lot of miles under my belt at the time, I'd only done a couple of trips up and down the coast. You can sort of step in at a entry level yacht master, which is your yacht master coastal, which is enough, you know, commercial ticket wise. And so that was the first one I did, past that. And so that was probably 2, 3 years down the track. But that's with, I had, you know, all my sort of dinghy background behind me, as well as the stuff with the Elliott. So it was really just the sort of the theory side of things, as opposed to not necessarily the, you know, how to sail perspective, but even like you get tested on parking boats and man overboard. So that was something I also had to learn in sort of 2, 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And so it sounds like it's probably quite intense between the work and doing those skippers, but that they would kind of help each other out. What type of things do you think you learned from the non kind of education side, but the actual work that, you know, would have helped you out that you may not have gotten just by doing the training?
Oh, like a lot of little incidental things in terms of all the maintenance that we did on the boats. You know, we were doing sail changes all the time because we'd have huge regattas. So, you know, if we had a sort of a wind forecast that was, you know, it was either going to be light or it was going to be, you know, pretty full on, we had 2 head sails to change between, you know, a good 10 plus potential yachts in the fleet. So it was just, constant sail changes, you know, anything to do with like putting new reefs in for the guys, and then just a lot of the maintenance stuff as well was really handy. And then like I was also working a lot with the guys in the actual sailing school, so I understood the syllabus, you know, from a marketing perspective, whilst then also sort of training for it as well.
Yeah, great. And looking at kind of what you do now commercially, so what does what types of roles are you doing? What does a day in the life look like?
A day in the life. I mean, if it was just I sort of, there's mainly two on the water on Sydney Harbour. You've sort of got two pathways of in the charter sailing yachts. Is you're either an instructor and you're going out for a day with a bunch of people that want to learn sailing or are partway through sort of learning how to sail or just want to progress, get skipper's tickets, things like that. Or you've got the, you know, the sort of the opposite end of the scale where it's, you know, again, a really lovely bunch of people want to go out, have a good time in a boat, have nothing, you know, to do with actually sailing it, but just want to go out with friends and, you know, not necessarily drink themselves silly, but have a good time, you know, on the water. And you know, height of summer, you've got all sorts of, you know, wonderful boat parties and you know, people just want to go to a place, drop an anchor, go for a swim, you know, either have a barbecue off the back or, you know, just sit around drinking. So you've sort of got two sort of sides of it in a way. But yeah, that like most of the stuff that I've been doing recently is I rock up, you know, I get told which boat I'm going to be on. I'll do a check of the boat before I sort of start her up and get clients on board, and then, you know, introduce myself, work out, you know, what the wind is for the day, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to teach, how I'm going to teach it with the wind that I've got, and then sort of structure my day as a, you know, in terms of sailing lessons and where I can go based on what I've got wind-wise as well.
Yeah, nice. And you probably come across, like you said, people like to go out and party and have fun and all kinds of different situations. And as we know, in sailing, there can be all kinds of different kind of crazy or funny or different things come up, you know, without naming any names. But what would be one of your funniest or craziest stories that you've had while you've been working?
If I can name names, so back at East Sail, we had a lot of instances where we'd get, you know, particularly the famous people, or we'd get approached for filming. And one particular time we were filming for the Bachelorette, where it was Sophie Monk's Bachelorette. So she came down and all the boys as her suitors came down as well, and there was just two yachts. And so filming started at some ridiculous hour in the morning. And so we're all dolled up for the, you know, myself and another skipper, we're all dolled up for the camera. And we're going through, we've got, you know, cameras, you know, everywhere down the docks and sort of on board and in our faces. And that was sort of, that in itself was relatively surreal. And then just going through filming and the shenanigans of filming on the day where we were meant to be, you know, the two of us sort of match racing between each other on a 0 wind day. There was no wind whatsoever. So, you know, we had to really make it look like we were, you know, going fast. We had the engines on the entire time, just in terms of, you know, we were flat stick racing, you know, with trying to do the angles to keep the sails full and, you know, going through tacks and all that sort of, you know, hyped up energy as we're flat stick, engine down, no wind anywhere else. But just in terms of, yeah, the filming of that was a lot of fun. That was, yeah, quite crazy, having sort of being mic'd up and having to really, really watch what I say and what I do, not just sort of from a normal sort of day, but then just having a producer in my ear going, okay, I need you to turn now. It's like, okay, sure. So that was probably, you know, one of the craziest days.
Yeah, how much fun. And I'm sure the producers probably don't really understand sailing, or when they say you have to turn now, you kind of like,
no, it's like, can you turn, like the engine's really, really loud, can you turn it down? And it's just like, well, we can either go places, or we can have,
Or
you
there
know,
can be
so,
no engine.
or we can have a sort of a quiet engine or engine off. So yeah, and just in terms of what a boat can do from a physical point of view, and what they want the boats to do is very different.
Yeah, how funny. And so I have to ask, who won? Who won the match race?
So it wasn't rigged, but
Never.
they sort of, they said, look, if the, I can't remember who was blue and who was red, but like if so and so can't win, then at least draw. And so we ended up drawing the race, so that there was no outright winner for that one. Sophie Monk had to choose the winner out of the boys.
Of course. Well, I guess that's fair. That's her thing there to choose.
But yeah, so that was a fun day.
Oh, how funny. Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to also speak to you a little bit about your kind of transition into racing, because so the 2019 you did your first Sydney Hobart Yacht Race, I believe it was.
Yep.
Tell us about that. What made you want to do it? How was your experience?
So I've forever and always wanted to, do a Sydney to Hobart race. And if I wasn't, sort of sitting down watching the start of the Sydney to Hobart, then I was out as sort of one of the spectator fleet on either side, jostling in amongst the rest of the spectator crowd, which in itself is a bit of a race from the start. But no, I always wanted to do it, and I'd sort of last year sort of set the goal to myself to kind of go, okay, it's the 75th, it's going to be a particularly big one, and it's about time that I really put my hand in the ring and went for it. And it was originally through my sail that I ended up speaking with Ian of Wings, which was the boat that I sailed on, but I sent him a message, or he sent me a message, and we started talking just in terms of looking for the blue water point score and all that sort of stuff. And I met him up in Hamilton Island when I was doing Hamilton Island Race Week, and sort of got talking from there. Loved the crew, loved the boat, and thought, right, this is perfect. If I can sort of secure my place early on a boat, this far out, that would be fantastic. So I'd sort of, definitely sort of set myself the goal at the beginning of the year to do it, and then just sort of had to try and make it happen. So, but yeah, through my sail, through, a lot of the other people that I sailed with as well. So I have to thank Janelle, who was a sort of a student of ESAIL and a student of mine, to then she was helping to pioneer, because she wanted to do the Hobart too. She was sort of helping to pioneer places, on Hobart boats, potential Hobart boats. So it was fantastic. It was a great race, and I'd love to do as many as I possibly can.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and so how was your first experience? I mean, as far as enjoyability, just obviously you want to do it again, but how did anything kind of crazy, any funny or crazy stories from your first race?
I think probably the craziest thing was, as we were coming across Bass Strait, we had in the middle of the night, RS5 had wrapped around the forestay an unbelievable amount of times, and so we were trying to sort of get that untangled and unturned, and it took finally hoisting one of our poor crew members up on a harness, and at one point he ended up supermaning from the forestay sort of sideways, and we're going, oh my god, like, can we just get you down at this point? He'd been up there for some unbelievable amount of time, but he came out as like with a nickname of Superman just because of how horizontal he was flying out of the forestay. Needless to say, we got the wraps out and the kite down and back up again. But no, so I think for us, like Wings, the boat was a beautiful sort of relatively new, I think 2 years old boat. It had only done one Hobart before, and the crew as well just made it that much more enjoyable. When you've got a crew that you can sort of pretty much rely on anyone, and you get along with everyone as well. That's one of the big sort of things, big ticket items that you'd need, particularly in doing any of these long offshore races. So the crew all got on well, and the boat was fantastic. in terms of, you know, we didn't have too many issues. So, and then like the weather as well just seemed to be not too extreme for lack of a better word, because, you know, I've watched previous Hobarts, and I swear every single other blue water point score race that we did that year had worse weather than the Hobart itself. So, you know, it was a pretty we were pretty lucky with the weather, and it was a fantastic race, you know, and you know, we did pretty well for the boat that we were on, and I definitely enjoyed it. I enjoyed the atmosphere down in Tassie as well. That was, you know, you did the race and you're full of sort of beans after that, and then of course like Tassie in itself just turns on, and Hobart's brilliant, so I loved it.
Yeah, nice. No, Tassie definitely does put on a good show when you get to the end of the race. And you kind of mentioned how you ended up getting your position and through MySail, which is awesome. Like you made your first connection, but then, you know, you met up with the boat and you met some of the crew. And did you do a lot of kind of racing with them in the lead up to doing the actual Hobart race?
Yeah, so once I'd sort of made, the connection with Ian and met the boat and met some of the crew, you know, the onus was then to, okay, the first thing I did with them was I helped a delivery down from Mooloolaba, because they'd gone from Hamilton up to Magnetic and done the races up there. And then after I was doing all my sort of deliveries down the coast, and, you know, sort of said, well, this is a great opportunity to to try the boat out, to try the crew, you know, and particularly with that delivery, it was like, okay, this is a solid boat, a solid crew, and sort of to go from there. And it was mutual in that, you know, it was very much, you know, on a delivery, it's sort of, particularly with the owner on board, it's a test for you, you know, as a crew member to kind of go, do I like this boat? Do I like this crew? As well as it is as much for the owner or the crew manager to kind of go, are you a good crew person? You know, are you going to contribute? So it was mutual in that, you know, we've both sort of gone, I'd like to go back racing. It's like, all right, we'd like you to come back racing. And so from there, I did a couple of the pit water races with them, as well as lined myself up for all the blue water point score with them as well, just so I could get as much, as Ian likes to say, time on wings as possible before the Hobart.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, and I think that's really important. And kind of to your point, that the crew and having a good crew makes the race, it makes it a good race and also a safe race. And so having that time kind of in the lead up is good, like you said, is try each other out in smaller doses and make sure that it's kind of going to be a good fit. So
but yeah, no, it worked really well, and just a great boat to sail on. So I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, nice. I mean, racing is obviously a bit different than cruising or potentially what you're doing as a skipper, but there's a lot of obviously skills and crossover that you would have with that experience. What do you think you were able to bring to the team kind of that would be a bit unique compared to a lot of the crew, because you do have all that kind of skippering and commercial experience?
From a lot of my stuff, in terms of, I'd like to think that I can sort of put myself anywhere on a boat, and in terms of any position, just from, you know, either back at the helm or main or trim, or you know, even I was far forward as bow during the Hobart race as well. So I can sort of go anywhere on a boat, and even if we start, you know, if there's issues, you know, on the boat, I'd like to think that I can help troubleshoot and potentially fix any issues that do crop up. And that's more from sort of, you know, that sort of training perspective, particularly with wings, because I have all the, you know, the tickets associated with my, you know, commercial licenses. So I've got my radio, my first aid, my sea safety and survival. So I've got all these extra, you know, sort of tickets as well that help during races, as much as, you know, sort of in my day-to-day sort of skippering jobs. So they sort of, they do cross over in that respect. So I can sort of, you know, I can, if you tell me to go somewhere as sort of, you are the skipper on the boat, I'm going to go, okay, I'll give it a go. So that's more really the only sort of thing. Otherwise, just I try and draw on as much as my dinghy days as possible. So
yeah, we have a comment from Janice in the chat as well, saying you're an exceptionally good helm
Janice.
too. So,
So yeah,
thanks,
Janice,
Janice.
wonderful crew on the wings,
Yeah.
on wings. So yeah, thanks, lovely.
Yeah. I think that's a good point as well, though, because a lot of people who potentially maybe have done a lot of crewing but haven't got the helming experience, then that's a harder position to slot into, especially in any kind of big weather. But over a long race like that, having people, who can take the helm in, big seas, heavy weather, is really important, especially if somebody gets hurt or people just need to change up quite a lot. So, I guess any kind of tips or any thoughts around crew how they could maybe learn some of that helming and get some more of that helming experience?
Yeah, I suppose helming experience is one of those things where it's literally the time spent behind the wheel. And the other thing too is every boat's going to handle slightly differently. And along with that though, in terms of you've got to first get behind the wheel in the first place, so you've got to have a lot of people who are particularly owners or skippers themselves who are willing to sort of hand the wheel over and give you a go. So I sort of came from that. I'd helmed before. I'd done a lot of skippering of dinghies and things like that. So but it's then the crew that are sort of potentially eyeing off helming in particular. You don't necessarily have to take any courses for it. It's literally just time behind the helm, and then hopefully getting yourself on a boat that could potentially allow you to get behind the helm and to have a go. And of course you're not going to be you're not going to pick it up like that. It's over time, and you pick it up, but just getting behind it and being able to get behind it in the first place. And I really like that the fact that the CYC's going through and doing the women's helm series, and that gets a lot of females behind the wheels, as well as throughout the races as well. They can either jump on board, and if the owners or other helms are willing to swap over, then that gives them the opportunity.
Yeah, nice. And any thoughts about, because you mentioned, the owners obviously have to pass over the helm to crew, and that can sometimes be hard to do. But then there's that benefit that if you are doing those longer races, that you have people who are trained up to do it. Any kind of thoughts or advice for owners who may be willing to give crew that experience, but maybe just need a good way to be able to help them and be able to kind of coach them? Any kind of coaching tips?
Sure. So if you are going to be sort of as an owner handing over the helm, the idea is the way we're taught to teach is you demonstrate, and then the whole idea is imitation. So if you're sort of showing you guys okay, so this is how I'm holding the helm, this is the sort of the things I'm looking for, whether they're just reading the telltales, whether they're trying to get a little bit of feedback from your main in terms of, okay, I actually need to either tell him to ease the main, and so that's why I'm getting a little bit of extra weather helm, so you can actually it's essentially you're not necessarily just handing over the helm and go, okay, go for it. There is a little bit of coaching that sort of needs to go along with it as well, particularly if as an owner you want your helm to be treated sort of the same way that you treat it. So that extra little bit of sort of coaching, and if you can, stand close by, and rather than sort of just going, oh no, turn this way, and try not to grab the helm unless you really need to, but that whole sort of, okay, this is what I do, this is how you can do it, sort of thing. And just it's a little bit of blind faith, but at the same time you're coaching them through it as sort of just to get them to get a feel for it as well.
And also thinking through kind of as a crew member, if you are out on a big race or even a passage or delivery or something, and maybe you're past the helm and you don't have a lot of experience in it, and for whatever reason something's going on and somebody has to pass you the helm, any kind of tips or thoughts to that person who's all of a sudden there and they have the helm and they may not be super comfortable about how they can kind of manage that situation for themselves?
Sure. So in terms of if you are that person and you're on the helm in that situation, depending, I suppose, yeah, in my mind, I'm just sort of going through all the potential situations that could happen, but
There's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah, like if suddenly, you know, the kite's, you know, done something completely left of center, you know, in that case, if it's a kite issue, you know, think about, you know, your wind awareness basically is the main thing. So if you can help by either, you know, trying to keep the same course, so trying to pick something in front of you to keep pointing towards. You know, a wheel is basically the same, left to turn left, right to turn right. You know, just try and pick something in front of you, aim for it. You know, if you're just trying to keep the boat steady, you know, particularly knowing where your wind is at all times. Like, is it behind me? Is it on my side? Is it in front of me? Am I at risk of jibing if I turn one direction? So, and also, you know, if in any stressful situation, there's probably going to be some sort of shouting, you know, on the boat as well. It's just, you know, so try and sort of breathe, don't panic, you know, and if you do get thrown the wheel, just sort of try and, depending on whether you're, you know, as a crew position and you're not necessarily the ones making the decisions, just try and sort of, you know, keep calm, carry on. And, you know, if you're getting sort of instructions on what to do, then follow them or try and follow them as best you can. You know, but particularly once you are behind the helm, any movements that, you know, you do make, any sudden movements are going to affect anything that's happening with the rest of the boat. So if you're going to make a maneuver or a turn, always tell people what you're going to do first.
Yeah, good point. Especially if something's going on and people are working on the bow or wherever they are.
Yeah, yeah. Get that forward to the poor bow guys who, you
Yeah.
know, have gone through attack and and they didn't know it until after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. They have pushed to the bow of the boat because there's a sail on top of them, which
Yeah,
has
yeah.
happened to me many times. And so are you interested, obviously you said you are interested to do Sydney Hobart again, but how about racing outside of that? You know, are you interested to kind of get into more racing in general?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like I love racing. I've loved it in dinghies and I equally love it as much in yachts. Just because that little sort of edge of competition is, you know, and you've got a whole lot of other yachts out on the water as well. You know, it's something I've always enjoyed and why I wanted to keep sailing. So, but yeah, I definitely love to get more into, I suppose, more what you'd sort of deem as like high performance racing. So getting myself up and sort of furthering my skills in bigger, faster, you know, more powerful sort of boats, you know, particularly with all these, you know, you think of, you know, vessels, as much as I do love wings, they, you know, they're a racer cruiser. So they've got pillows, you know, and I don't sort of think of a race boat as something with pillows on it. So, you know, it's something that's more a shell and just completely hums, you know, as soon as it starts going over 10 knots. So, and, you know, I'm a bit of a need for speed, just something fast and fast paced. And, you know, whenever you're sort of absolutely surfing down waves, you know, at speed, that's got to be like, you know, that's definitely in my books as thrill seeking and fun. So yeah, definitely looking to get into, you know, bigger, faster boats. And with that, I know that there's a lot sort of more involved. It's not just sort of sit back on the rail. It's, you know, you're either in the grinders or your trim's got to be, you know, absolutely perfect. So that sort of heightened, you know, performance racing is really something that I'd love to get into. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And if you think about either what some of the things that you are doing or that, you know, you're planning to kind of do to kind of work towards getting more into that racing, what are some of the things that, you know, from a learning perspective or a experience networking perspective that you're kind of looking to do to make that happen?
Yeah, that's it. It's very much a sort of, in that case, getting on those types of boats, it's very much a networking perspective. So, you know, the boats are out there, the crews are out there. It's just a case of you know, trying to put myself forward as, okay, I'm a sailor, I can be crew, I can, you know, try and fit myself into any role if there is a potential sort of space in amongst the crew. And, you know, the best sort of way that I'm trying to sort of to get myself up there is, you know, talk to all these like kind of boats and these crews that I'm potentially looking at in terms of, you know, my idea of a performance boat at the moment, and sort of, you know, putting myself forward and going, hey, you know, would it be possible to jump on board? Because it honestly doesn't bother me what sort of position I'm in. I could be, you know, sewer as far as that's concerned for the entire race, but I'm now sort of working my way up, you know, in terms of these fast-paced boats, and from there I can sort of learn as much as possible, you know, just being on board one of these things.
Mhm.
So and it's always like, for me, it's always learning. Doesn't matter, you know, what I'm doing. It's just, there's so much to learn in the sailing world. So anytime I can get on a boat like this, just like on any sort of performance boat, is a fantastic learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said you kind of don't manage, you don't, you can happy to do any kind of position on the boat, but if you had, you know, preferred position or area of the boat, what would that be?
Helm, for sure. I love getting behind the helm, but you know, helm or trim, you know, I just want to feel useful, really. You know, so, and I do love trimming, as well. That's always good fun. But yeah, just getting behind the helm of a boat, I adore it. It's great fun. So if you put me in the helm, I'll be forever grateful, and good luck getting it back.
Nice, I like it. So what are kind of some of the, you know, challenges that you've experienced in trying to transition, you know, more into the racing side of things?
From particularly from you know, working as a skipper and an instructor, most of our work is on the weekends. So when I was trying to go between sort of working and trying to sort of build that racing sort of side of thing as well, you know, you do have to make a couple of work sacrifices, just because it overlaps sailing and work, you know, being the weekends. So you know, for a while I was picking up a lot more, or trying to pick up a lot more sort of weekday work, or, you know, committing myself to sort of certain weekends for work, and then certain weekends for racing. So just because I didn't have that normal Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job, you know, it's sort of, those are the kind of you know, differences and things in between. But you know, the last sort of thing I was mainly working in was events. You know, so that sort of gave me a bit more freedom to sort of be working almost that normal 9 to 5, and then sort of spend your weekends racing, as opposed to, you know, sort of, you're skippering one of the boats and you can see all the race boats out there, and you're going, oh yes, I could be racing right now. But yeah, it's you just have to sort of balance it, really, in terms of, you know, going from racing to you know, being on the water for you know, work as well. So, but at the same time, like, if I'm on the water, I'm happy. So but it's just, yeah, focusing more on the sort of the racing side of things. It's just finding the balance between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's interesting because, you know, you're not in the office 9 to 5,
Yeah.
Monday to Friday, but you're out on the water. So you're kind of getting that experience of being on the water way more than most people with office jobs would get. But then, you know, you're kind of busy during those kind of key times. So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting kind of opportunities and challenges, I guess, at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah. Other than that, like, I just love being out of the water, and I'm very lucky to, you know, my office is the water. So yeah, I just really enjoy sailing. I don't know really what else I would do if I didn't sail. But yeah, I love it. It's great fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And with the racing side of things, are you looking more kind of blue water offshore racing, or are you looking more kind of one design, or what formats most interest you?
I think, yeah, definitely I love a good offshore race. So all of the blue water and the longer offshore. I know we were sort of potentially looking at you know, the Sydney to Auckland as you know, and you know, Sydney to Noumea, and those sort of big races as well. Like, I definitely, you know, really enjoy those sort of longer offshore. But at the same time, you know, just round the Cairns in the harbour is great fun. And you know, particularly when it's fast paced, if it is one design, then there's that extra sort of added you know, sort of you're not necessarily trying to beat a certain time for your handicap. You really are sort of matched boats, and that brings it sort of to the next level. So really sort of I'm not necessarily focusing on just one, in terms of like if it was just one design, if it was just offshore racing. You know, the whole point that I find so fantastic about, you know, the jobs that I do, particularly as skipper instructor, is you're not going to get the same sort of, you're never going to get the same thing over and over again. You know, you're constantly changing, you're constantly getting all these sort of different things happening. And I think because I'm never just sort of in one place, I'm just doing a whole lot of, you know, different things all the time. That just keeps it exciting, and your options are there. So if there was the opportunity to go one design racing or, you know, a lot of offshore racing, I'd jump at either, really.
Yeah, nice. And I guess, you know, the skills that you develop in the different formats and kind of types of racing really might be slightly different, but they're also really help each other. So, you know, you can get a really good balance from trying a lot of different types of racing and different types of sailing as well.
Yeah, exactly. Any sort of, yeah, again, it's one big learning experience. So any sort of boat that I do get on, you know, particularly if it is a one design, and I can learn as much about that particular class as possible. You know, and then of course a lot of that stuff would potentially be transferable to, you know, a lot of that other different boats that I do jump on. So you know, and even your offshore racing gives you like a whole extra sort of you know, side of things, particularly with your now going long haul and your stamina and all that sort of stuff as well. So, and your decision making, you know, particularly in a short term for one design, you know, in a around the Cairns, as opposed to decision making over a long, you know, longer passage, is you've still got to make those decisions. It's just in terms of what the outcome is going to be after what sort of time. So I find that really interesting as well. Yeah, from a navigation sort of perspective too.
Yeah, interesting. And have you done you've obviously have your RYA Yacht Master, so you would have done a lot of navigation through that, but have you done
Yeah,
a lot of kind of offshore passage navigation?
not as much. Just in terms of from all the RYA stuff, it's, you know, there is still an onus there for a while on paper charts, and, you know, if all else fails, you'll be able to navigate you know, your way anywhere with a paper chart. So and of course, you know, your chart plotters are sort of, you put in point A, point B, and you know, you draw a line between the two. But, you know, things like you know, more of the offshore and the racing style of navigation, for longer passages like expedition, I really only had my sort of first look into that during a lot of the Blue Water Point School with Wings, and then into Hobart as well. So it's something like that. And again, it's just, you know, definitely something I'd love to get behind and learn, and, you know, just all the overlays and the sort of the information. You know, some of the boats that I've been on as well, in terms of the amount of like instrumentation and you know, all the readings that they get, and how they're then, you know, putting that into their own polars and trying to get the best speed out of a boat. It's like, you know, it's really interesting just to try and see how far you can push a boat, because it's always so variable in terms of the wind you're going to get, the conditions you're going to get, and what that outcome is. So that's, yeah, definitely something I'd love to get more into in terms of that navigation. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and it's like you said, there's so much science behind it, so you can really kind of learn the science and learn the numbers and work out how everything kind of fits together with the polars and with the sails and with the navigation beyond just getting safely from point A to point B, but how do we kind of get there as fast as possible? And I know, so the Ocean Racing Club Victoria is doing a navigation masterclass coming up. So I'll pop the details in the Facebook page for anyone who's listening and interested in doing something like that. And I've actually signed up to do just their fundamentals course myself, to try to get a little bit more of the, because I've done some training too, but it's the paper chart, get from A to B, rather than more practical. We're in a race boat scenario. How do we use the equipment? How do we kind of make that, you know,
particularly because, you know, with racing, it's you're definitely focusing more on, you know, your angles and coming out, and what sort of angle, you know, is best going to suit that sail in that sort of wind condition. and all those sort of overlapping diagrams. So, and then, you know, you want to sort of really narrow that down in terms of, you know, okay, we're going to come out of this mark, or, you know, we're going to be coming up to this particular sort of wind strength and direction. You know, what's going to be the best sail for this? What angle is going to be the best for us to get from A to B? You know, and then, yeah, you go more sort of into this heightened VMG, you know, particularly over a long, you know, a longer distance. And then, of course, what the next sort of you know, wind is going to do, and then you get into sort of forecasting and meteorology as well. So yeah, all that stuff is sort of super interesting, and would be incredible to, you know, really sort of knuckle down and get to know.
Yeah, there's so much to learn, isn't there? Non-stop learning experience, but
yeah,
one of the really cool things about this sport is you just never stop.
Exactly.
So you mentioned a couple of the big races that you were looking to hopefully do, but I guess depends on if the borders open up and, you know, what happens with those events. You know, any other kind of, what are your other big plans for the next 12 months, assuming we've got to stay in Australia?
For a while there, I was sort of, you know, without, you know, sort of, I wasn't necessarily sort of really going to go into the racing side as much. I'd sort of got my heart set on Hobart last year, and sort of go, okay, like I can go for it, I can go straight, and then I might think about sort of, you know, doing something else. But since then, since Hobart sort of steered me more on a course to, you know, go back and do like a bit more sort of racing, and particularly sort of trying to get on the bigger boats in yacht racing. What, you know, before, when borders were open, I was sort of thinking of taking my yacht master and sort of going overseas, and because it is an international ticket, you know, the Med or the Caribbean or things like that, and more getting a, you know, sort of having it, you know, another sort of go at different waters, because, you know, I'd like to think I know Sydney Harbour fairly well by now. So it's just a case of exploring all these different options and going all these different places. But I mean, if there are, you know, offshore races to get to those places, then why not as well? And once I'm in those places, like, can I use my ticket to, you know, skipper those waters and learn those waters as well? So, you know, ultimately sort of make my way around the world in some yacht, some shape or form, whether it's I can race around it, you know, and that would be as far as something like a Clipper, or, you know, what used to be the Volvo Ocean Race, which is now just the Ocean Race, I think. So that's sort of, you know, ultimate potentially, but I'd love to just explore different waterways, and big long offshore races would, you know, definitely sort of help me get from A to B in that case.
Yeah, nice. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I guess in the meantime, I mean, Australia and Sydney is an amazing place to sail, so
Yeah.
lots going on here. So
not complaining that I'm stuck in Sydney sailing.
No, it's beautiful, and yeah, we are doing quite well compared to a lot of places in the world at the moment. So look, Katy, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. That was, yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you. And look, everyone, we'll see you next week. We have a Nick Bice joining us, who was used to be involved in the ocean race and has some really interesting stories to tell us as well. So yeah, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you'd like to know more about this program or the MySail app and community, head on over to mysail.team. That's mysail.team. Until next time, stay safe and happy sailing.